What's going on, guys? Hope everybody's having a great day. Please do me a favor, smash that like button for me, and if you get anything from the video, subscribe to the channel. I really would appreciate it. So let's jump into Bryan Kohberger's new Alibi. What does he say that he was doing during the time that police say that he was inside of the 1122 King Road residence committing a quadruple homicide? Let's see what he had to say about it.
This morning, Bryan Kohberger's alleged alibi revealed for the first time. Kohberger's attorneys say he was on a long drive alone the night 4 University of Idaho students were murdered in November. In a new 4-page court filing, the defense says Mr. Kohberger has long had a habit of going for drives alone. Often he would go for drives at night. He did so late on November 12th and into November 13th, 2022. But beyond that, the defense didn't reveal much more in the alibi, adding, Mr. Kohberger is not claiming to be at a specific location at a specific time. There is not a specific witness to say precisely where Mr. Kohberger was at each moment around the time the murders took place.
Alright, so what do we think about that? What do you think about the fact that Bryan Kohberger says he was indeed driving around in his car on the night of November 12th into the morning of November the 13th? That he would often go for nighttime drives. So that's his alibi. There is no witness that can say that Bryan Kohberger was where he says he was. He doesn't probably even know exactly where he was at what certain time. That was routine for him, right? That he would go out sometimes and drive around at night. I mean, I guess now we know why he never turned in an alibi. Because he didn't have a good alibi. His alibi, his side of the story, what he is saying now is that, yeah, I was out. I was driving around that night. Could have been in the area. That could be my car on film in certain places. But I didn't do this. I was just driving around to clear my head. I was just driving around at night, just by myself. I'm sorry that nobody knows where I was at 4 o'clock in the morning. But I was alone, driving around in my car. I was not at 1122 King Road committing a quadruple homicide like you think that I did. That's basically useless information for us to have, other than the idea that this is his side of the story for what he did that night. This is what Kohberger wants you to believe, that, hey, sometimes I go for nighttime drives and I just drive around. I did that night and this happened, and now this is all just some big misunderstanding because I have nothing to do with it. But we have to look at the case as a whole, right? We have to assume that the jury is going to hear the evidence that we've heard so far. Hey, maybe the DNA's not there. Maybe the sheath isn't brought in. I'm not sure what will or won't be. But from what we've heard, from the evidence that we know exists, we can say that Bryan Kohberger did leave his house the morning of November the 13th. And he went for a drive. We can say that his phone has no data collection, as if it were turned off or dead while he was supposedly taking that drive. We have cameras that show a white Hyundai Elantra that seems to match the car that Kohberger has driving toward the Moscow residence. We seem to have that car on video doing a 3-point, 4-point, whatever turn and parking after going back and forth by the residence multiple times. Then we have that car on video speeding off erratically after the homicides have taken place. Then we have that car come back to the area later on that day and then back home to Mr. Kohberger's residence. So we have footage of all this taking place, and we have Mr. Kohberger saying, yeah, I was out driving around in my car. That brings the chances that that's his car seen on camera at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning driving around Moscow higher. So now, if police maybe have something showing that car park, something showing somebody get out of that car and walk into the King Road house, well, then we're getting closer to what we need to convict someone beyond reasonable doubt. Bryan seems to be taking the prove that I did it stance in this case. At least that's what we gather from the documents that they put out, the motions that they filed. Basically saying, hey, I don't care what you think you know. I care what you can prove. And so far, based off of the stuff that you've given me, none of this proves anything. So you're just going to put together a story and tell the jury and hope that they believe it. And we're going to make sure that the jury understands they haven't proven their case. There is no proof that Bryan Kohberger walked into 1122 King Road on November the 13th. There is no proof that Bryan Kohberger is connected to the victims in any way. There is no DNA of the victims in Bryan Kohberger's car that he is accused of driving after committing a quadruple homicide in 8 minutes. That's 4 people in 8 minutes with a blade and then driving back home. But there's no DNA whatsoever, no blood signs, nothing in Bryan Kohberger's car, office, apartment, or home. They're going to say, we are resting on the doubt in this case. Mr. Kohberger does not have a witness that can say that he didn't commit this crime. But the burden of proof doesn't fall on Mr. Kohberger to present a witness to you to say that he didn't do this crime. The burden falls on the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Kohberger did commit this crime. Now, beyond a reasonable doubt is very specific. It is not, well, I think he could have committed the crime, or it seems likely that he committed the crime. It's not even, he's more likely than not guilty of the crime. If you have any reasonable doubts that Mr. Kohberger committed this crime, then you must vote not guilty. And if you do not vote not guilty, then you are taking the chance of sending an innocent man to his death for a crime he didn't commit because the state has failed to prove their case. As the defense for Mr. Kohberger, we want to tell you what he did do that night. We want to explain some of the nuances of this case to you as to why he was out driving around in his car at that time of the day. Mr. Kohberger is a former heroin addict. He was driving around because he has trouble sleeping sometimes, and that helps him relax. Whatever they want to say, right? That's the defense that they're going to use. Prove it. Because they're telling you that they have no way to prove that he didn't do this. There's no witnesses that place him anywhere else. But the cops have a story that they're telling, and they don't really have proof that he did this. They have proof that it's possible he did this. So as long as Bryan Kohberger's defense team sticks with the idea of, hey, we didn't do this. We were out driving around. We did not go to King Road and commit this crime. We were out trying to clear our mind. He's an insomniac. He's a former addict. Sometimes he has trouble sleeping. This is something that he does on a regular basis. We can show you other nights where he was out and about in the same general area doing the same type of thing and show you that he would do this. But the prosecution, they're going to try to convince you that because he was out at other times, that he was scouting something, that he was planning and plotting something. But they're doing this with absolutely no evidence directly connecting my client to these victims. Nothing. Nothing but a sheath with a minuscule amount of touch DNA that could be transferred from anything onto that knife sheath at any point in time in history. The police don't have a single thing that puts my client inside the house at 1122 King Road, and they definitely have nothing to prove that my client committed the murders at 1122 King Road on November the 13th, 2022. My client is innocent of these charges, but it's not up to him to prove his innocence. It's up to them to prove his guilt, and he has no guilt, so they will not be able to do their job. I hope you people can see through the charade. Thank you for your time. And that's how the Bryan Kohberger defense is going to handle this case. That's just that. I mean, it's pretty clear to me that that's going to be the direction they're going. They're exercising their right to silence, right? They're not trying to give the state an inch of ground in anything. And I think Bryan Kohberger is well within his rights to make the prosecutor prove the case against him. What I worry about is if the prosecutor brought charges against the right person too soon and didn't have the clean-cut evidence that they thought they had. That's where you should be concerned, because then you would have someone that's going to face trial for a quadruple homicide with national attention and most likely get a not guilty verdict when the prosecution can't prove the case.